Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for the Mayor of the City of Clarence, Councillor Brendan Longley.
Well, hello and welcome all. Before proceeding, I pay my respects to the Murrumbidgee people as the traditional and original custodians of the land on which we meet. I acknowledge the continuing connection of the Tasmanian Aboriginal people to the skies, land and waterways. I pay respect to elders past and present. Before we commence with tonight's meeting, please let us all pause for a quiet moment of reflection and respect. Thank you, councillors. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
Yeah, just the 11th of November.
So thank you, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening and welcome to the Clarence City Council meeting on Monday, the 11th of November 2024. This meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube. What is said in this meeting is not protected by privilege, and there is a link to the agenda papers on council website. As we're all aware, today is the 11th of November, Remembrance Day, and at the 11th hour, on the 11th day, many of us were at services around the city and further afield today. But I would ask, in remembrance of the fallen and those that have served, we please all stand and observe a minute's silence. Lest we forget. Item number 2, apologies. The Deputy Mayor, Councillor Alison Ritchie, is a late scratching this evening. Item number 3, declarations of interest of councillors or close associates. Councillor Kennedy, you declare an interest, I understand, in 3 items this evening?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. 7.1, 7.3 and 8.4.1.
Thank you. Councillor Chong?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. 8.4.1.
Thank you. Are there any other interests to declare from colleagues? Councillor
yes,
Hunter.
Item 7.3, thank you.
Thank you very much. I trust we'll have a quorum. Now we head into our omnibus items. Item number 4 is the confirmation of the minutes. The minutes of the council meeting held on the 21st of October, 2024 have been circulated. Are there any matters arising? There being none, we move now on to 4.2, mayoral communication. I table the independent auditor's report for the year ended 30 June 2024. Pleasingly, Clarence City Council has again received a glowing audit report, and I thank the CEO and the CFO and their teams for the considerable work in this regard. Thank you, CEO. I also table, colleagues, a letter from Denise McIntyre, who's the Deputy Secretary of Strategy, Housing, Infrastructure and Planning for the Department of State Growth. Ms McIntyre advises that the information from the site investigations for the AFL High Performance Centre project has been compiled and is currently being considered by the Tasmanian Government. So we wait with bated breath on that, but I table that letter. Thank you, CEO. I also table a letter from Mr Devi Sharma, President of the All Indians Association, and Mr Sharma writes, Dear Mayor Blomley, on behalf of the All Indians Association, I would like to extend our warmest appreciation for your presence at Diwali Mela 2024. Your participation brought great joy and encouragement to our community, enhancing the spirit of togetherness and cultural celebration. As President of the All Indians Association, I am truly grateful for the support shown by you and Clarence City Council. Your involvement helped create a memorable event and reinforced our commitment to fostering unity and inclusivity. Thank you once again for your valuable support, and we look forward to future opportunities to collaborate in strengthening our community. Warm regards, Devi Sharma. Thank you, CEO. And I thank Mr Sharma for his letter and the wonderful work that he and his many fellow committee members of the All Indian Associations do for our community. Over the last month, there have been 7 Diwali events throughout Greater Hobart, and it's been wonderful to represent Council at those events. I would now like to take this opportunity to invite those members of the community who attend live stream or playback council meetings to take part in our consultation on council meetings time change. On the back of a motion by Councillor Hunter some meetings ago, we are interested in the community's preference on council meeting start time how they would like to engage with council and how they would like to attend council meetings. This consultation is open now for the next 4 weeks on council's Your Say platform. Moving now on to item 4.2.3, diary entries, and I table my diary entries from the 22nd of October to today, the 11th of November, and also the Deputy Mayor representing me, and I thank her for that. 4.3, council workshops as listed in the agenda. 4.4, tabling of petitions. CEO, are there any petitions this evening?
Thank you, Mayor. No, there are no petitions.
Thank you. We move now on to 4.5, reports from outside bodies. First one being the Copying Refuse Disposal Site Joint Authority. Councillor Walker, I understand you will table a report? Thank you very much. And that will be included in the council agenda for our next meeting on the 2nd of December, so thank you for that. Moving on to Tasway South, Councillor Warren, I understand you'd like to table a report?
Thank you. Yes, I believe the quarterly report has already been received by email, but I'd also like to table the annual report for the last financial year and report back on the meeting that we held quite recently, I think it was Thursday, where we received a really interesting briefing on the container refund scheme, which is finally about to start. Well, I shouldn't say about to start, it's finally scheduled to start, and the best information I can give you is mid next year, but we await that with great anticipation. We also received a briefing from Greg Robertson from Sorrel Council about the implementation of their green bins. Not all councils have green bins like we do. They've implemented it in such a way that it will lend itself to the implementation of FOGO, which is the Food and Organics Waste collection, when that becomes available, when a suitable site becomes available for all southern councils. So it's good to see that councils are thinking forward towards that. So I recommend that you read the reports if you want more detail.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Moving now on to Tas Water Corporation, and as I indicated at our last meeting, I represented the city at the Tas Water General Meeting in Launceston on the 28th of October. At the meeting, the annual report was tabled. I've circulated that electronically to all colleagues, but I now formally table a copy of that annual report. And move now on to the Greater Hobart Committee. Also, as mentioned at the last council meeting, the next meeting of the Greater Hobart Committee will be held this Wednesday, the 13th of November. So I'll provide an overview of that discussion and, if possible, add a session, even a copy of the communication following from that meeting to colleagues. Are there any other reports from council and special committees and other representative bodies? Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to table the minutes from the Belgrave Community Arts Centre meeting of the 9th of October, bearing in mind that this is a standalone committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. There being no other minutes or reports to table, moving now on to 4.6 being the weekly briefing reports. The weekly briefing reports of the 21st and 28th of October and the 4th of November 2024 have been circulated. Are there any matters arising? Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The 21st of October 2024, the Head of Strategic Development, Communications and Engagement, the launch of a new City of Clarence website and updated visual identity. Could I please be advised as to whether this was done in-house or done by external consultants, and if the latter, the cost?
Thank you, Councillor James. Ms Wicks.
Through you, Mayor, we can provide, it was done by external consultants, and we can provide a briefing memo on that at a later date.
Thank you, Ms Wicks. Just on that, though, all within approved budget. Thank you.
Thanks for that clarification. The other one is the 4th of November, Party in the Park event application refusal. I understand there were some safety issues and they were quite extensive on page 3, namely there was a signage advertising bring your own drinks, a keg on tap, and also the size of the park for the number of attendees, traffic management, security, the number of patrons and the event coinciding with the 11th and 12-year school celebrations. My question is, was there any liaison prior to the meeting, in that a lot of these issues I would have thought have been discussed by the appropriate council officer, perhaps by the council's manager of the environmental and recreation facilities. So again, it's a shame that something like this, where the community would be involved and enjoy the festivities. So my question is, was there any discussion prior to the event? And if not, can we improve on this for some future activities in the park?
Thank you, Councillor James. CEO, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Councillor James. Look, the event, as I understand things, was organised by private individuals without reference to council. When council became aware of it, we engaged with that group, but within the context of and the significance of some of the issues that were presented, they weren't able to be resolved.
Anything else, Councillor James? Anything else with the weekly briefing reports, colleagues? All right, well, I note that we're now at the end of our omnibus items. Can I please have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Seconded, Councillor Goyne. All those in favour? Those against? So, Councillor Walker, you've abstained? Okay, thank you. Moving now on to item number 5, which is public question time. There are no public questions on notice. Moving on to 5.4, questions without notice. Are there any questions from the gallery? Thank you. Name and suburb, please.
I'm turned on. It's Victor Marsh from The Bluff. Would the council please update the community on the current stage of progress in the development and delivery of the community awareness campaign, including coordination with LGAT and other councils across the state to ensure consistency and collaboration across the sector?
Thank you, Mr Marsh. Ms Wicks.
Mayor, we're continuing to collaborate with the sector and other councils across Greater Hobart and looking in the coming weeks to launch.
Thank you, Ms Weeks. Mrs Marsh, I believe you have a question.
Joan Marsh, Belrive. What specific health and safety protections does the Work Health and Safety Act 2012 Tasmania provide for councillors, council employees and members of the public attending open council meetings within the council chambers?
Thank you, Mrs Marsh.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, I'll take that question on notice.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the gallery? Thank you, sir.
Todd Burrows from Howrah. I just wanted to ask the council in relation to a proposed development at 183 Tranmere Road that, given that it doesn't comply with the building
Mr
envelope...
Burrows, I'm sorry, our rules don't allow that. It's because it's a matter before council's on the agenda, you're not able to ask questions about it. You are able to make a deputation if you had it registered by midday on Friday, but I'm very sorry, there's no opportunity to ask a question open council on a matter before us. I'm sorry, they're our rules there. Anyone else wish to ask a question?
Point of order, Mr Mayor. Is it possible to potentially waive the rules to allow...
No, I've made my ruling. Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Take a seat. Are there any other questions from the gallery? There being none, we move now on to item number 6, which is deputation. Deputations by members of the public. Members of the public making a deputation are reminded that they're limited to 3 minutes, and time will stand at the end of that time. And in fairness to all, I will strictly enforce that time limit. CEO, are there any deputations?
Thank you, Mayor. We have one deputation tonight from Mr Graham Reeve.
Thank you, Mr Reeve.
Graham Reeve, Lindisfarne. On 23rd of October, Clarence City Council was privileged to host in a sold-out concert at Rosny Barn the world-renowned Japanese jazz pianist Makoto Ozone and his trio. This sold-out concert was met with standing ovations and will be remembered as perhaps one of the finest jazz performances the city has hosted. Clarence Council is to be commended for giving its residents the opportunity to hear a top-quality international artist in such an intimate setting. Doing so provides inspiration for our own young artists. Makoto Ozone's career is distinguished. His 1983 solo debut at Carnegie Hall in New York launched him onto the global stage, leading to collaborations with icons like Chick Corea and Branford Marsalis, as well as performances with some of the world's most prestigious symphony orchestras. Recognised with Japan's Medal of Honour with Purple Ribbon, Ozone is revered in Japan, a nation that holds jazz in high esteem, much as Australians celebrate our elite athletes. Yet, it is regrettable that Clarence could only offer this celebrated musician a small, subpar Alex Steinbach upright piano, an instrument more suited to a small-town community hall than to a city venue hosting a world-class performance. Pianists, unlike many musicians, rely entirely on the venue's instrument, making it vital for any community that takes pride in the arts to offer them the tools that they need to perform their best. In a jazz trio setting, sound quality is paramount, as the piano must balance and blend with bass and drums without losing its distinct character. A good quality grand piano or a top-order upright piano, such as a Yamaha or Kawai, offer dynamic range, tonal depth and a responsiveness that brings out the pianist's artistry. On the other hand, a small upright piano limits sound quality, notably in the low bass resonance, and its less responsive action results in the pianist being unable to perform to his full potential. Small upright pianos not only restrict the artistry of the performer, but also diminish the emotional impact for listeners. This is why recitals and almost all Eisteddfords are performed on grand pianos. By offering Ozone a small, substandard piano, the council risked conveying a lack of regard for both his legacy and the audience's expectations. Just as we expect high standards for our sports venues, we should ensure that our performance spaces meet the needs of elite musicians. Quality instruments enhance not only the artist's ability to perform, but also the community's cultural richness. Investing in a quality grand piano, or at the very least a high-end upright piano, would elevate Clarence as a city that values the arts and the experiences it offers residents. Whilst a larger conversation is needed about establishing a dedicated concert hall in Clarence, at the very least, in the interim, Clarence Council should be able to provide a piano that honours the exceptional talent that it hosts.
Mr. Reeve, thank you, and thank you for your passion and your advocacy on this matter. For full transparency, you did email me on the 24th of October, expressing your disappointment and concern, as you've just outlined then. I responded to you on the 1st of November, and for the interests of full transparency, I will just read out that middle paragraph, so those of us in the public gallery and at home to understand Council's position on this. And that is that, as I wrote to you on the 1st of November, in the months leading up to the unique musical event, our arts and events team communicated extensively with Makoto Ozone through his agent to ensure they understood the nature of the barn, its small capacity and the equipment available. The team researched available pianos through our industry connections and were unable to secure an acoustic grand piano within a budget that would have allowed the event to proceed. A number of available options were presented to Makoto, and his preferred option, as you point out, was the acoustic Steinbach with conditions which were met. Can I please assure you and everyone else that Ozone was and his band were accommodated to the very highest standard, and they very much enjoyed the feedback I've received, the intimate and rustic charm of performing in the barn. Your comments regarding lifting our game and supporting the arts and culture areas in our city are well made and are well supported by this council, and I thank you for your contribution this evening. Are there any other deputations, CEO?
No, thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. We now move on to item number 7, which are planning authority matters. And I advise that Council now intends to act as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993. 7.1, which is a planning application for 6 Chilean Court Sanford dwelling, and I understand there's an alternate motion that has been circulated. Councillor Green, would you like to move your alternate motion? Oh, sorry, Councillor Kennedy. Oh, thank you. Sorry. Thank you very much. Yes, you had an interest.
Far from moving it. Running away.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy.
Removing.
I don't have a list in front of me. I'll have to find that. So thank you, Councillor Goyne. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Councillor Goyne, please.
I think we have well workshopped not just my alternative, but the alternatives that we've had in this place previously in regards to similar matters in the same area, including properties that are actually more closer located to the object of concern, which is the existing quarry, which is set to be closing in the near future, as well as also, as everybody is aware of now, the plans are available, or the application is available for the development for that area. So I seek colleague support with my alternative motion.
Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Councillor Mulder, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is a matter where the officers have recommended a refusal under the planning scheme because that's the technical requirements of the planning scheme as it stands in relation to its proximity to a quarry. A quarry whose environmental licence allows it to blast, even though it probably will never do so. A quarry which is probably on its last legs because its major client, us, no longer uses those services because the quarry has got to the point where it doesn't have the right mix of gravel to clay required for our red dirt areas. But here we have a planning scheme that says you're not allowed to do it. Here you have a planning scheme that says noise attenuation. The same conditions that apply to the Flagstaff quarry, which is blasting bluestone on very regular bases, and over here you've got a red gravel quarry that is basically dug out with a backhoe, run through a tumbler machine and produces the material and is probably on its last legs. So here we are stuck with that old enigma of a black and white planning scheme that says you cannot do this or you can do that. And the common sense tells you, as Oscar Wilde said, the problem with common sense is not very common. The common sense tells you that this area will grow, that this area will have houses on it. Yet here we are with some antiquated glitch in the system, some black letter law that says you can't do this. And as we move towards a state where the government is busily trying to remove all planning decisions from us, here is a time where common sense can apply and we can adjust the planning scheme. And then we need to go and say, well, if you want to take the black letter approach, then you appeal it and see how you go. And you put the onus back on the state government who has produced such an inflexible planning scheme and forced us to either agree with the officers or do the common sense thing. So all I can say is that here is an example of why we should not have development assessment panels, because eventually we need the voice of the people in there. It's constrained. We can't just go against the planning scheme. But as someone famously once said, policy is for the guidance of the wise and the obedience of the, I won't be pejorative, not so wise.
Councillor Hume, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to follow on from Councillor Mulder's comments, what's being applied here in the officers' recommendation, and look, I commend the officers, they do a great job, and their job is to strictly interpret the planning scheme and apply it to development assessments. But in this case, it's not just the planning scheme as written, it's also the planning scheme, as we know, it doesn't stand on its own, it is given definition by TASCAT decisions. Now, we know that TASCAT does not have a standing precedent. It's got, I think it's got a persuasive precedent. Persuasive precedent means that they will tend to follow the same guidelines and rulings, but they're not bound by them. Now, what's happened in this case is we have a TASCAT decision that says a use is established over the full extent of the site, not just the extremities of the building or structure, when it comes to looking at the attenuation code. Whereas if you look at figure 3 in the acoustic assessment, there's clearly a diagram showing that where the dwelling is situated, if a sound barrier, 1.8 metre high sound barrier was installed, they would achieve between 0 and 45 decibels in that corner of the site. So the question is that TASCAT's grappling with is that they're saying, well, you should apply it to the whole site rather than just where the dwelling is. But what we've got to realise is that there are important provisions in the planning scheme that address issues of amenity for neighbours, for people who may be affected by a development. But what we have here is an issue where it's actually the people doing the development itself and who are going to be living in it who are, stand to be affected by this. The thing is, if we make a decision that goes against what TASCAT ruled and we accept the alternate motion, there actually isn't anyone, there's no objectors, so there's no one to actually challenge that. So we can do that, and I'm going to suggest we do that, that we actually say, no, we're going to take a different interpretation than TASCAT, and we're going to say it's reasonable for the sound standards to apply to where the dwelling is situated, provided that those mitigation measures are put in place. So I will support the alternate motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Councillor James, please.
I think it's very easy to say that and only sort of highlight one aspect of this, and that has been identified as TASCAT. But on page 18 of the officer's report, it says, and I quote, the extractive activity at the School Road Quarry is currently operational. It is permitted to undertake crushing, grinding, vibratory screening, and with the written permission of the EPA, blasting. These activities have the potential to emit noise, dust, ground vibrations and shock waves into the immediate vicinity. And okay, there is a mention here of what TASCAT has made in relation, or has identified as in relation to the attenuation code. But also at the same time, it says, and I quote, an existing activity must be understood as including the fullest possible operating capacity associated with the level 2 permit of the EPN. So it has a permit with the Environmental Protection Agency. And that goes back to the very heart of what the EPA advises, that the Environmental Protection Notice for quarry activity issued by the EPA conditions is compliance with this particular quarry code of practice. So we're talking about not only TASCAT, but we're talking about the EPA, who have established that this is an operational quarry. It has the potential of blasting, but then again, it doesn't necessarily has had to undertake blasting. But at the same time, we have written authority by these agencies to say that this is not that the application for this particular dwelling is not in keeping and is really in sort of harm's way in relation to should the operation of the quarry continue, and even to the extent of blasting or doing any vibrate screening, and also the actual ground vibrations and shock waves. So why do we have to actually have this this discussion when in fact the authorities that have permitted this quarry to operate, and on the same side, the subject site of this particular, which adjoins the quarry, it has a separation of 0 metres. The proposed dwelling is to be located approximately 115 metres from the nearest boundary of the quarry site, as far from the quarry as it can practically be located, but well within the attenuation areas for all permitted activities associated with the quarry. So we're talking here about agencies that have the jurisdiction over operations of a quarry. It is an operation quarry. It has a permit to operate, and therefore it can continue to operate. And the EPA and TASCAT have come out and said this is an inappropriate development because it's in the pathway of some of these issues which could jeopardise the safety and well-being of people in the immediate vicinity. The officers have got it right. And if this motion that's before the chair is declined, it's not supported, then I will seek to move the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Hunter, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Normally I take the officer's recommendation quite seriously, particularly in relation to planning matters, and considering going against their advice I take quite seriously. However, in this instance, I initially felt the same sentiment as Councillor James, but having done further research into the history and future prospects of the quarry, I am keen to support the alternative motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Walker.
Look, I genuinely thank all of the presentations made by colleagues around the table on this matter tonight. I should probably remind some that we're sitting as a planning authority, and common sense does not have a determining weight in making judgment for that matter. Going through this, I have reflected a lot on the previous one to come up in this area 2.5 years ago, where a application situated closer to the boundary than this. I weighed heavily on the noise impact assessment and on how the actual dwelling itself has worked through strategies that will meet the actual needs of the inhabitants of the dwelling. And I do concur with some colleagues around when you weigh things up, you really need to reflect carefully on matters where you might not be voting the same way as the planning advice. We have some discretion, but it's not unfettered discretion, it's limited. And I think when we weigh things up in this area and we take into account, if you like, the plot ratio and the number of residences that sort of fall within, that wider radius out, that there are grounds, I think, to go with the alternate that Councillor Goyne has put up. So I'm inclined to support that. And I don't think it's going to... the quarry is the prior occupant, but I don't believe that this application will put restrictions on how they go about their operations. It might be a different matter if it was to.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? There being none, Councillor Goyne, right of reply.
On Friday, when I was seeking further advice as to the quarry owner, I was actually going to contact the quarry owner, and I thought in my discussions with Councillor Hunter that I actually knew who that was. It has since changed hands quite a long time ago. But I did speak to the family that not only lives adjacent to the quarry but sold the quarry. And they proceeded to tell me that the quarry had closed years ago. Despite living next door, they actually thought it had closed. I also have a dear friend that lives a couple of houses down the road, so I am very, very well aware of the impact the quarry does not have on the properties, and she is actually an explosives expert. I have mentioned in this place when we approved 12 Chilean Court that she has never heard any explosives or any loud noises coming off, and I will also preface that she is such a dear friend but likes to complain about most things that were within her capacity, so I would know about it if it did cause an effect. However, that is obviously just subjective information. However, having been a resident of the area my entire life and knowing the families in the area, I will seek colleague support with my alternative motion, because I too also very strongly normally support the officer's recommendation, but in this instance I felt that the alternative was necessary.
Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Well, colleagues, I'll put the alternate motion, seeing the name of Councillor Goyne, and that is that the planning application for 6 Chilean Court be approved.
16.
Sorry, what did I say? 6. Sorry, my apologies. 16 Chilean Court. I wear my glasses, I have no excuse. 16 Chilean Court Centre be approved, subject to the following conditions and advice as outlined. All those in favour? Those against? Thank you. So carried. Please invite Councillor Kennedy back in to join us. I didn't hear that. I'm sure that's probably a good thing.
Communicate that to the people of number 6. I'm sure they'll be happy.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder, as always. Colleagues, moving now on to item 7.2, which is a planning application for 7/9 Lower River Street, Belrive, change of use to visitor accommodation. There's a recommendation that it be approved subject to conditions and advice. I'll call for a mover of the recommendation, please. Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Councillor Mulder, please.
Mr Mayor, as always, we're reluctant with these particular things, but there we go. There's not much we can do. There are a number of measures afoot, and the only thing that I can really say is, in the absence of the Deputy Mayor, whose passion this really is, that perhaps when we move this, because we must, and the planning scheme hasn't really thought about this, and therefore we are where we are. But I do note that some councils, like Hobart City Council, for example, have actually applied a differential rate proportion to properties like this that are being used as commercial properties. I guess the only real issue is that yes, we must agree with this, but perhaps the CEO or yourself might care to enhance us on the possibility of actually increasing the rates as Hobart City Council does, along with any other moves to try to deal with this issue, which is having a major impact upon housing in this state.
CEO, please.
Thank you. As we've previously discussed on the back of Councillor Ritchie's motion, we are doing some work that will be presented as part of the budget process next year to deal with that issue.
Anything else you wish to contribute, Councillor Mulder? Councillor Hunter, please.
Not much to add after Councillor Mulder's start. Thank you.
Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Warren, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't have the same level of discomfort around this as I do on some of the ones that have come before us recently, where the occupancy has been up to 12 people and we have heard the phrase party house frequently used. This is a single bedroom dwelling where you can imagine the maximum would be 2 people. One person suggested on Friday you could put 12 people in there, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I feel that this is less intrusive on the surrounding neighbours than some of the other ones that we've been forced to approve. So we will need to approve this according to the planning scheme, but it's not as bad as some of the others.
Anyone else wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Walker, please.
Thank you. And debate is always, well, it's not really debate because we can't go back too back and forward. I thank Councillor Warren for her commentary, but I actually have the opposite opinion. I think of all the Airbnbs that have come before this council, This one, whilst would probably get the prize as the smallest, I suspect is the most impactful on its neighbours. This is right down the end of a very narrow block, passing by 3 other properties. People that would be likely to use this visitor accommodation are not always likely to be coming in daylight hours, might not necessarily know exactly which spot it is. So from my perspective, maybe not a party house, but as far as disruption and impact, this would probably be at the upper end. So I'd note that, and I'd note the fact that you know, if you're sort of working towards competitive neutrality, I think you can make a case for the differential rates argument for this, as it's a commercial activity. And again, I would, and as is my custom, make the point that you know, we have a dearth of hotel accommodation. We have less hotels than we used to, and the 155 beds that we could have approved, I think, would have made a big impact for this site. But there we go.
We had a bit of licence tonight, so we might just stick to the matter before us, please, rather than going outside the current application before us. Councillor Jones.
It's interesting, again, that we have another application in relation to this, and I was going to put up a notice of motion during the week, having studied the Hobart City Council's proposal, and there are some real possibilities and merits in relation to that. But nevertheless, we're not there yet, and I hope to be able to have something listed at the next round of council meetings in relation to short-term accommodation. This one, as Councillor Warren mentioned, is not to the extent to which we have been dealing with the numbers that occupy a room or rooms within a particular dwelling. And there is a limitation, of course, on the number of people that can actually reside in this particular unit. But notwithstanding that, there is still this potential, as it has been with all these other developments, that it can, and I believe in this particular case, cause an impact on the immediate vicinity, and therefore it can cause all sorts of issues which impact upon the privacy of individuals and their basic entitlement to be able to enjoy the privacy of their own home. So until such time as we get some sort of middle ground or get something there where these sort of things are a commercial activity, in my mind there's no doubt about that, and Hobart City Council has really gone down not the correct path in my opinion, but a way in which they are able to now charge a double rate, if you want to call it that, in relation to short-term accommodation where it's for commercial purposes. So I won't support it, as I have on numerous occasions provided my concerns in relation to short-term accommodation. And there's no change to that from what has been presented to us before. As I said at the last meeting, we haven't tested this at the Tribunal TASCAT. I don't think we have the ability to do that, because it just seems to me that from others' perspectives that it's too hard and it wouldn't get up in the tribunal, for want of another word. So I will not support this, and I have noticed just this moment ago that I will be putting forward a notice of motion to the next council, similar to but not exactly in relation to what the Hobart City Council, and therefore I hope that that may be considered. And one way in which I can feel confident about voting for short-term accommodation, where I believe the commercial market is predominantly playing that important role in the eyes of some, and therefore I believe at this particular point in time I will not be supporting the recommendation.
Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Right of reply. Thank you. Councillor Mulder.
Mayor, contrarians aside, the issue here between some of the contributions, which I appreciate, is that this is okay because it's not a party house versus this is not a party house but we're going to have traffic running up and down an internal block. Might I suggest that as a single bedroom unit, the internal traffic may be no greater, probably less as visitor accommodation than it would be if someone occupied it. So I really don't see where that is an issue. The other talk about accommodation, although it's quite light, it just bears dealing with. This is the market at work. Why is five-star accommodation not meeting its targets despite tourism actually being up? Why are 3- and 4-star accommodation motel type units closing despite tourism being up? The answer is Airbnb. In a state of where people are facing a cost of living crisis that we're all talking about, people are still going on holidays, thank God, but they're choosing this style of accommodation. So if we want to continue with tourism, we're going to have to work out how we are going to meet that market. Unfortunately, at this stage, as much as I might not like it, it's Airbnb. So if we're busy running around here trying to do it, now what we need to do now is to say, okay, if we're going to have Airbnbs, then we're going to have to come up with some policies where we can regulate it. I wish it wasn't happening. I wish the original intention was that, you know, you've got a 3 or 4 bedroomed house and you're in your declining years, as some of us are, that you could, you know, the original idea was that you'd sublet a room for a week or two or all the rest of it. However, the market is moving on, and when we're discussing these things, now I know I transgress, but then I am still addressing some of the issues that are being raised. Now, despite that aside. Now, this is a planning matter. It is not a strategic tourism other matter. So we've got to come back to the planning matters, and that's the stuff that I alluded to. I wish it wasn't there, but as a planning matter, we need to now go down. And I would discourage Councillor James from moving an entire motion when the purpose of my exercise, as the CEO explained quite clearly, is that they are investigating this matter and they are having a look at it, and I'm sure they will come back to a workshop with us.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Well, colleagues, I'll put the motion, that is that the change of use to visitor accommodation at 7/9 Lower River Street, Belrive, be approved subject to conditions and advice. All those in favour? Against? Anyone abstaining? Thank you. All right. So carried. Thank you very much. Councillor Kennedy, we're moving on to 7.3.
Out.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
And Councillor Hunter. Thank you. Colleagues, item 7.3, which is a planning application for 183 Tranmere Road, Howrah, 5 multiple dwellings. There's a recommendation for approval subject to conditions and advice. I'll call for a mover of the recommendation, please. Councillor Mulder, thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hume, thank you. Councillor Mulder, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. You may have noticed some reluctance around this table and some issues that have been raised. But we have a planning matter before us. And we've had a look at some of the issues. And at one stage I was minded to have a crack at the issues of loss of amenity due to exceeding building envelopes. I was also somewhat concerned about the overbearing or bulk and scale overbearing in relation to this thing. But I've read the report, I've listened to the people, some of whom quite lately this afternoon addressed us. I've also been and had a look at the site with the officer's report and the thing. And as much as I would suggest that 5 units on this little block and the stuff does it, we're still stuck with a planning scheme. And the planning scheme might say that an acceptable solution wouldn't even come to us, but the performance criteria require us to look at the impact, the loss of amenity. Now, amenity, unfortunately, is not in the according to the planning scheme, is not in the eye of the beholder. It is according to some strict criteria and previous decisions that have been made by the appellant, by the authority to which we appeal, which these days is something called the Tasmanian Civil and Administrative Tribunal. But for most of us old dinosaurs, bloody-minded or otherwise, it is the old appeals tribunal. So this is an appeals tribunal that looks at these things, and the amount of impact is, as I agree with the officer's report, it is not of the kind of impact that would warrant a refusal, which I note no one has particularly put forward because of the work required, no doubt. So it is a little bit reluctant that I do it, but I can say this. This is the kind of infill, almost high-rise development that the government, who actually the minister's signature is on the Clarence planning scheme, not the mayor's, not the CEO's, the Minister for Planning's signature is an instrument of the state government. So the state government have signed this planning scheme, and they have a policy about high-rise, about infill development and about densification. Policies I disagree with, but which I cannot change. And it's high time the government accepted the public opprobrium that its policies cause and stop hiding behind councils pretending somehow or other we are either builders or blockers, because their own track record of building ain't too great.
Councillor Hume, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Very much along similar lines to Councillor Moulder's contribution, we have a scheme that, a planning scheme where bigger and bigger things are more permissible than they were before, and this is causing amenity issues, and people are understandably getting upset about that. And then it's a scheme that we as a council, when we sit as a planning authority, our role is to interpret and apply the scheme, whether we like it or not, even though the scheme is an instrument of the state government. We have some input, but very limited input into the development of the scheme. And the residents surrounding this development do have some very real concerns. I've had some emails and some phone calls, but then when we look at the scheme, we know that it would be very hard to, well, impossible, I believe, to reject this development and then have our decision upheld in the tribunal. And the reason is because where the concerns have been raised, they are either in areas where the building has met the acceptable solutions, or there are some concerns, for example, in relation to, look, you've got overshadowing as an example, where they relate to performance criteria, but the elements of the building are within the area that meets this, that cause the overshadowing, meet this acceptable solution. In relation to density, it meets the acceptable solution, therefore is a permitted use in relation to density. I could go through all of those use standards one by one, but I don't have the time. But what I will say is I've considered it very carefully. I've considered the representations very carefully. I am still open to be convinced if one of my colleagues has an argument that this development does not meet the planning scheme, but on my detailed consideration of it, it does. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Warren and then Councillor James. Thank you, Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Regular viewers will know that I'm not a fan of overdevelopment, and this is a case in point where we've got 5 double-storey or more units on a very narrow block of land. I've just found the bit that I was looking for on page 77, I think, which says that due to the definition of adjacent property, 185A doesn't qualify as adjacent because it's about this far from the boundary instead of adjoining the boundary, which seems, yet again, to bring us back to common sense not being very common, because the impacts on this property are significant, particularly in terms of overshadowing. And I take to task the use of the word reasonable, and that, you know, a loss of sunlight of 50% is reasonable. I don't think many reasonable people would consider that to be reasonable. There's also, if one of these dwellings had solar panels, then that would be taken into account. But because they don't, then it's fine to overshadow them and take away all their sunlight, thus meaning that they can never get solar panels. It will never be sensible to get solar panels. So, look, I feel that this is a development that doesn't take into account the neighbourhood in which it's being developed, particularly the neighbours on this side. I think it could have been done better. I think it could have been done with more consideration for those neighbours. Yes, it meets the planning scheme. I haven't prepared an alternate motion because there are no grounds under the planning scheme that would stand up to appeal, but I don't feel comfortable with this being approved.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Councillor James, please.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. And again, from the outset, can I say, and perhaps I could correct the previous speaker, and when she mentioned there were 5 two-storey units, when in fact, having spoken to one of the representatives today, it was their opinion, and I accept that by looking at this particular development, that they are houses. Some of them have 3 to 4 bedrooms, and a couple of them have a butler's pantry. So you really are moving away from what we determine as a unit into, a fair-flung house on a very narrow block, and by the very nature of that, that block is, and from the attachment, it shows a long block, which basically is head tail, right from the Tranmere Road right down to the Foreshore Trail, which abuts Council's Foreshore Trail, and there is some overhanging of that particular house. Well, I'm going to use the word house here, as well I'll be using for the other houses on this particular development. The fact of the matter is there are deviations from the acceptable solutions, and it's been identified that the setbacks and the building envelopes are in fact contrary to the acceptable solutions. And of course, you go through the performance criteria and address that in that particular format. So the setbacks and building envelopes for all dwellings, in addition to the protrusion from the front setback at Unit 1, Units 1, 4, have small portions, creating non-compliance with the building envelope on the northern elevation on the upper level. Unit 5 protrudes at both sides of the building envelope as the site narrows towards the western boundary. And also we can then address the other factors that have come in under the general residential zone. And there's non-compliance with a small portion of the lower and upper floor of the proposed Unit 1 protrudes into the prescribed frontage setback of 4.5. To make other things, which is of interest to me anyway, and which I believe hasn't been addressed in relation to this development, a proposal, is that there's no parking other than 2 visitor parkings on the site. So, and adjacent, and on the actual roadway, there's a bus stop, and it's already been shown on page, identified on page 75. An open corrugated iron bus shelter is located on the road reservoir adjoining the frontage. So where are they going to park? There's 5 houses, let's call them townhouses because that's what I believe they are. Where's the parking? There's 2 visitor parking on the site. Presumably, if there is 2 cars per house, then you're going to have all sorts of issues because you're not going to be able to park on the immediate frontage because it's a bus stop. So you're going to kick the can down the road as far as parking is concerned to other properties, and that's just going to compound the problem and create what I believe on a very windy corner, real problems in relation to this particular development. So on that, you know, it's just too much. It's overdevelopment to the 10th degree, in my opinion, and you're trying to put 5 townhouses, 3 to 4 bedrooms, at least in each and every one of those, on this narrow bit of land, and therefore you haven't got the visitor parking, you haven't got the access to what we call a normal access driveway to each of those units if there's visitors attending that property. So it doesn't, in my opinion, meet the acceptable solutions, and in my opinion, the performance criteria has been deficient in being able to address what I believe is an inappropriate development, and it's going to basically impact not only on the adjoining owners, but on the street itself.
Any other speakers wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Chong, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, this is one I think we all wrestle with, and you do get these in time to time in planning meetings where we get to a point where we can't see how we can't approve it because it complies sufficiently with the planning scheme. We don't necessarily like it, and I certainly empathise with a number of the representations and the commentary that we've had from the people nearby because, yes, it will impact them. And I don't see that, you know, that whether we can get away from that. But I think, and certainly the work that Councillor Mulder did try looking to see if he could find sufficient reasons for an alternate motion and couldn't, suggests that however much we may empathise and however much we may dislike sometimes these applications, as a planning authority, we are required to approve it. So I will be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Councillor Goyne, please.
I too will reluctantly be supporting this matter tonight, and shock horror, concur with just about everything that Councillor James mentioned this evening, particularly with the amount of land that is taken up in buildings with the property envelope, and so it is a significant concern. And as Councillor Mulder said, you know, we sort of looked for the wiggle room, but the staff, as always, have done their job, and I will reluctantly be supporting their recommendations.
Councillor Walker, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. A question was raised about car parking. I suspect the cars will park in the double garages. That said, one would expect that from time to time there will be more than 2 per dwelling, and there will be conflict and competition on the street. Now, matters have been raised as far as the fact that it's within the parameters. It is. But that doesn't mean that the impact isn't real, and whilst planning reports can seem quite blunt sometimes when responding to representations made, planning responses in reports are responding along the lines of the planning scheme that they're operating under. That doesn't mean that there won't be amenity impacts, shade impacts and other matters. This sort of development might not have been the intention of the planning scheme, but as people know, have heard from me before, you can't actually legislate intentions. And one of the issues I think is the need for high density accommodation isn't actually being met. What is desperately needed is the actual 7-8 storey things within a CBD, close to the close to transport hubs and close to services. The scheme doesn't seem to incentivise that, but this sort of development is incentivised, and there will be a market for it and it'll be taken up. So that's probably about all I've got to say on the matter.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Anyone else wishing to speak to this? Okay, Councillor Mulder, right of reply, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've heard of the 3rd degree, Mr. Mayor. The 10th degree? 3 1/3 times the 3rd degree. But we're looking at, and the topic was raised tonight about unit versus housing. Well, a housing unit, I live in a housing unit, not a commercial unit. We're all reluctant to do this infill stuff, or most of us are. But that's what the planning scheme allows. But the issue that I was interested in, which it came up, was with the road access. It is what it is, and it ain't what it ain't. It's there. The mistake was made with Tranmere Road and Howrah Road, as it was made with the East Derwent Highway, as it was made with Cambridge Road, and where we built these major rat runs, and then we put private entrances on them. And the message in here, we've done it with Oceana Drive. We avoided it with Pass Road. And if I have my way, if it isn't taken off us from the development assessment panel, we will avoid the same mistake with the extension of Oceana Road through Skylands. This is the role of councils at the strategic level to try to sort these problems out so that in 30 or 40 years' time we haven't got major problems in greenfields development because we resolve it. We resolve it by requiring major rat runs to not have private entrances. Therefore, you don't have you don't have parking, you don't have the obstructions and those sorts of things. But this is not where we are with this particular street. But it's a salient lesson about what we need to avoid in the future. And all the talk about, oh, it doesn't meet the performance criteria, like I don't believe it meets the performance criteria. I'm quoting now because I do, unfortunately. The point that is the point. If you think that the performance criteria haven't been properly assessed and they are subjective assessments, then you bring an alternative to this chamber and you run the debate. As I tried to do, but to me, it didn't meet that standard. And that's what we're stuck with. So I don't know about the 3rd degree. Well, actually I do, but I don't know much about the 10th degree, but this certainly isn't a 10th degree issue.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. I'll put the motion. That is that it's a planning application for 5 multiple dwellings at 183 Tranmere Road, Howrah, be approved subject to conditions and advice. All those in favour? Those against? Any abstention? So carried. Please invite Councillor Hunter and Councillor Kennedy back in, please. Well, colleagues, we now move on to item 7.4, which is a planning application for 2,972, 2,985, 3,055, 3,475, 3,507, 3,641 and 3,645 South Arm Road, road reserves and footways of South Arm Road, Driftwood Drive, Bengal Road, Parabot Close, Spit Farm Road, Algona Street and Hope Lane, South Arm and Opossum Bay. Water reuse pipeline.
The time has expired, Mr.
And I just hope there wasn't a 616 issue there, but I think we're all aware that what we're looking at here, of course, is the consider the application made for a water reuse pipeline at those addresses that I've just read out, and I won't be reading out again. I'll call for a mover. Thank you, Councillor Moulder. Seconded, Councillor Goyne. Councillor Moulder, please.
Mr. Mayor, yes, this is a logical extension of the great reuse schemes that we have developed. My only major point, I guess, was why are we bringing this up from Blackman's Bay? Isn't our Blackwater good enough? But no, there are logical things that are required. I guess it goes without saying we've debated this many a time, and the issues are well known, and we've been there. It may be noted that this is a change of the original path, which required digging up the current Spit Farm Road, which is totally inadequate, is totally dangerous, and all the rest of it. So what we're going to do is we're not going to solve the traffic problems, we're just going to solve the drainage problems by bringing it up through Bangor Drive. Now, my question is that Council owns the property at, is it Bangor Drive? Which was originally purchased as a potential alternate route to avoid Spit Farm Road from just north of the Opossum, from just south of the Opossum Bay Road. My only question really is despite the fact that that developer cannot proceed with that development because it's outside the, quote, urban growth boundary, the ubiquitous urban growth boundary, the criminal urban growth boundary, which is why we have infill development, by the way, is that they aren't in the business of contributing to the road, because without the development, who's going to invest the money in the road? So my question really is that given the traffic needs, is it time that we perhaps compulsorily acquired that road, that part of that land over which this pipeline will run, in order to construct a road to bypass Spit Farm Road and to solve all those problems and provide access to that particular golf course? That is, I guess, where I was saying this gives us an opportunity, because we're already using it as a drainage easement, to perhaps make that roadway, unless I've got this all wrong. That is the only application I make, and that. And by the way, I might say that I congratulate the proponent on the recent public acknowledgement of their standing in the community on this particular issue. So that's my only question.
Thank you, Councillor Moulder. Councillor Goyne.
Do I get an answer to that?
I just am very grateful that this is happening and continuing, because it is a wonderful resource for the people of South Arm. And my only thing that's sad is that they're not bringing fresh water across when they're bringing the grey water. So I seek colleagues' support, especially given the ongoing delayed wait times at those filling stations.
Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to note that there were a number of concerns raised by the community around natural values, which are very important to me. However, having worked in conservation land management as well as planning tracks and trails through bushland areas, I understand the juxtaposition in trying to find the most suitable path through bushland areas. And having read the details of this, I'm confident that the proponent is finding the best path to put this pipeline through. And I think if anything, we can go by in regards to the best practice weed management practices undertaken on the golf course. That gives me faith that they will follow through with the natural areas assessments and choosing the best path through the bushland for the pipeline. So I will be supporting this.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor, and I suppose the history of this has been ongoing, and I'm actually pleased that I think it was the Tasmanian Conservation Trust that actually exercised its statutory right to appeal against the decision on the grounds of Council's permit, principally on the alleged impacts of the pipeline on the critically endangered spotted handfish, with additional grounds relating to scheme standards. Now, what's interesting here is the appeal against Council's decision was resolved, and this is where the process, in my opinion, works very, very well indeed. The matters were resolved with amendments of 2 conditions which prescribe drilling and construction management. Now, this one of the key factors that the community was really against, or had some strong concerns, was the location and also the impact, as has already been mentioned, on the natural values of the area. So that, I believe, has been addressed, and I think the proponents have steadfastly stuck to that arrangement of the drilling or the laying of the pipe and into that vicinity where the spotted handfish tends to habitat, if that's the right word. The other thing is of interest is that the advice that is attached on pages 129, 130 inclusive are interesting, because the swift parrot, page 130, any clearance of identified foraging and nesting habitat of the swift parrot should be avoided. If avoidance is not possible, clearance should be minimised, undertaken, and so on. That has a Guernsey, but one liner in the actual on page 127 in part 2, construction timing to minimise the risk to swift parrot breeding. Okay, I think that should have been more of a condition, but nevertheless, if these are read in conjunction with each other, namely the recommendation and then subsequently the advice, okay, perhaps that may be a way to improve on that. The other one is in relation to the Aboriginal Relics Act. Again, in the advice, it does go into great detail in relation to that. And again, I probably need to be corrected on this, but one of the factors that held up and on the conditions for approval of the golf course and its environs at the time was there was some Aboriginal relics that were identified within the actual, under the Act. Now, they appear to have been addressed and also to haven't necessarily been a problem in relation to the recommendation, in my opinion. The other factor that I would like to seek some advice on, and that is on page 128, the applicant must enter into agreement with council prior to construction of the pipeline in such form as council may require. The agreement is to provide for matters including the ownership of the pipeline, construction standards including operation and ongoing maintenance responsibilities, upgrade or decommissioning of the life of it, and registration and maintaining services. So council must enter into agreement with council prior to the construction, but it seems on page, on page 131, the reuse pipeline would remain privately owned and managed. So my question, Mr Mayor, to the appropriate officer, given that the pipeline would be in private ownership, what ability or what authority does council have in relation to that?
Thank you, Councillor James. Do I allow the question? I will on this occasion. Mr Maher. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Jones, for the question. The purpose of that condition is to actually ensure that the privately owned pipeline, its maintenance responsibilities and its ongoing life of it is agreed between the parties because it's sitting on public land. So it would remain privately owned and all parties would therefore know who has the responsibilities to look after it. That's the purpose of the condition.
Thank you, Mr Maher. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Walker, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, don't get a lot of pipelines coming through for consideration as a planning authority, and in essence a complicated matter, but one that has been evolved over a significant period of time, and with, I guess, goodwill from a variety of parties. So I have no reluctance in supporting this. I have enthusiasm, and the application, is obviously triggered and in place for the use of the golf course, but never has it been more apt to use the term positive economic spillovers when it comes to what this will provide, especially in the lead up to bushfire season. So I hope it goes ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Warren, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I can see the benefit of this. I appreciate the work that the applicants have gone to reroute the pipeline. But I do share Councillor Hunter and Councillor James' concerns about the environment. And I must say that the advice worries me significantly, also because it's not enforceable. I seek clarification on, I understood there was some legal issues with Aboriginal relics at Arm End at the moment, whether somebody can clarify that for me. But the ones that I'm concerned about is threatened vegetation, threatened flora and swift parrot, particularly the swift parrot where it says should be avoided, but if you can't avoid it, that's okay, just don't kill too many, and I find that really offensive and really, it's like, forgiveness is easier than permission. So I can, it's good that we've chosen the least terrible route for the pipeline. I presume it's the least terrible route. But if there are threatened species that are in danger, then I think we need to have a much firmer conditions on that rather than just unenforceable advice. So I'm not really comfortable with this.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Anyone else wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Hume, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I very much also welcome this application. This is going to increase the productive capacity of the South Arm Peninsula from, I understand, 40 to 350 hectares. We're looking at 150 jobs during construction, 100 jobs ongoing. Having said that, the economic benefits of a proposal are not a relevant planning matter. There's a variety of things that we've been debating that are, and one of those has been the vegetation and matters in relation to threatened species. Now, it says in the performance criteria, however, that minimal tree loss is expected to occur and no loss of hollow-bearing trees. My understanding is, from reading the officer's report, that in relation to the swift parrot, the loss of swift parrot habitat is actually considered to be a very low risk, but conditions have been put in to address that risk in the unlikely event that it should occur. I hope that I'm reading the officer's recommendation correctly, but that's my understanding of what I'm reading in the performance criteria, is that it's a low risk. In fact, I understand most of the vegetation that is going to be removed will be eucalyptus trees. So I support the application.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Any other colleagues wishing to make contributions? Thank you, Councillor Darko.
Yeah, similar to Councillor Warren, I have reservations regarding the lack of stringency around the environmental protections. I don't think we actually have enough protection there. And the Swift Parrot has gotten to the stage that it has, through a process of death by 1,000 cuts, and I cannot in good conscience support something that doesn't have stronger protection to ensure that we're not further depleting their numbers. I would note that in terms of gums with hollows, eucalyptus and gum are terms that are used interchangeably, so yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Darko. Anyone else wishing to make a contribution? Right, while Councillor Mulder settles in, I'll
He's settled now.
You look much more comfortable now.
Water management is a key issue here.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. I'll enter the debate as a councillor, not as your mayor. And as you know from my diary last meeting, I met with proponents a number of weeks ago now, and I was particularly impressed with the lengths that they've gone to and the professionalism and what they're actually looking to develop and deliver for the peninsula. And as we know from our report, there were 32 representations, I'm not very good with numbers, so 32 representations received, 11 not supportive, 21 supportive. And I think that sort of speaks volumes. But to back that in, I represented council at the South Arm Remembrance service today, and I joined the community for lunch after that service, and they're excited. We looked out over the Iron Pole Golf Course. They're excited to see that peninsula become much more viable as an agricultural productive area. I think is exciting everyone. So not only obviously the economic benefits that Councillor Hume touched on, but the social benefits that will be delivered as well. So I am very excited by this. The community, the peninsula, are extraordinarily excited by this. And frankly, the sooner we deliver it, the better for all of us. So, Councillor Mulder, right of reply, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, in particular for your comments. What another game changer. First of all, my earlier contribution, I would like to say I apologise for misleading anyone, but it seems I'm the only one who didn't realise that there's a difference between Bediga Court and Bangor Road. I would have much preferred this went through Bediga Court. I would have much preferred that we took it away from Spit Farm Road, but unfortunately that's not the way it is. But having said that, yes, you still have to support this. As for another councillor who was talking about the quality of the water, this is actually what we should be doing with all our water reuse. If you have a look at the report, it will actually tell you that it's Class A water, drinkable water that is coming aboard into South Arm Peninsula. Do it. The proposal is to, for those who, for the interjections, will connect to the existing DN25 recycled water pipeline Institute Argona Street that extends towards the West River under the river, Derwent to Class A water treatment plant adjacent to Taswater Blackmans Bay. So we're getting here some decent water. We're getting it into the peninsula it requires. The issues are, yes, you can't build anything without disturbing something. And the question is do you want the water or don't you want the water? And we do. And I just hope it. Now, I'm not too sure how many golf courses we can handle, but the water into the peninsula, I'm sure will be welcome, especially at the Class A level.
Thank you, colleagues. I'll put the motion, which is motion 7.4, which is for a water reuse pipeline, utilities for private irrigation scheme, including pump station, building and associated infrastructure, be approved, subject to conditions and advice. All those in favour? Against? So carried. Thank you, colleagues. Moving now on to item 7.5, which is a modification to delegations under the Land Use Planning Approvals Act of 1993. I'll call for a mover. Thank you, Councillor Chong, and a seconder, please. Councillor Warren, thank you. Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Very briefly, this is a technical requirement to make sure that the right people have the right titles in the delegations. I seek my colleagues' support.
Councillor Warren.
Nothing further to add, thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Anyone else wishing to speak to this? There being none, there's no need for right of reply. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? So, anyone against? Thank you. That was unanimous, I believe. So, thank you very much. So carried. Moving now on to, we now conclude our deliberations as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993 and move on to item 8. 8.1, there's no petitions tabled at a previous council meeting to consider. I'm moving on to 8.2. 8.2.1, which is Clarence Bushfire Mitigation Strategy 2024-2034 for adoption. Call for... Councillor James.
Yes, more than happy to move at the officer's recommendation.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Kennedy. Thank you. Councillor James.
Thank you very much. Look, it's long in coming, and I would like to start it and say congratulations to the staff. They've really put a lot of effort into this. And a question I did ask on Friday, will those fire trails that are currently in place within this particular strategy, will they still be operational? And the answer I was told is yes. So look, it's only a minor thing, but overall I think this has taken a while, but what the end result is commendable, and I seek council support.
Councillor Kennedy.
Nothing further to add, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Hunter.
Yes, I would very much like to commend council officers as well as the consultant who helped to develop this. This is best practice in the industry, having worked in that industry. It's very comprehensive, and I'm very pleased to be on this term of council and to see this go through at this time. So I very keenly will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Anyone else wishing to speak to this? There may not be needed right of reply, Councillor James. So I put the motion, that's a recommendation, that Council adopt the Clarence Bushfire Mitigation Strategy 2024-2034. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much, colleagues. Moving now on to item 8.2.2, the Environment and Biodiversity Grants Program. Call for a mover of the recommendation, please. Councillor Chong. Thank you. Second, Councillor Kennedy. Thank you, Councillor Chong.
Wasn't expecting to do that, but there you go. First time we've gone through these particular specific grants. I think that the two that I recommended are eminently sensible, and I seek my colleagues' support.
Councillor Kennedy.
No, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak to this? Councillor Walker, thank you.
Yeah, look, I will be supporting it, and I do support the successful applicants, being both the land care around the cat management and the Girl Guides. That said, there is a significant amount of rollover that is identified here, and I look at the unsuccessful applicants, and I'm not sure whether a grant process or just operating within the envelope of grants is the best way to deal with any recurrent amounts. Land care groups, have big buy-in to the areas they work. They live there. They enjoy those spaces. They know them better than us, and dare I say, some of our officers as well. There is a degree of frustration within these elements, and it's not just one particular group. And as rules are brought in that may make their ability to perform maintenance harder, then actually how we work in that space may need to change. I really think we need to boost these groups right up, because what they perform and what they do provides natural improvement, but also enjoyment for just wide swathes of our community. Again, these tracks, these trails, our coastal areas are not just used by a narrow user group, they're enjoyed by such a wide range. So I won't dog in the manger, I won't try and sneak a little trick thing to try and quarantine that money, but I'm telegraphing it that we need to think fast, and I'm not sure that just using the envelope and framework of grants is going to give us the best bang when these groups have got their concerns.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Anyone else wishing to speak to this motion? Councillor John, would you like that right reply?
Clear, Mr Mayor, I will say, and obviously we've discussed the land care groups requirements, and I think, yes, Councillor Walker's probably right. We should be looking at how we deal with giving them more money, but that's not in this grant program. This has specific criteria. That's maybe something we need to be talking about at a budget time, about how we support them better, because they support us extensively. But this particular grant allocation, I think my colleagues support.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, colleagues. Moving now on to item 8.2.3, which is the Little Howrah Beach Master Plan Community Consultation. The recommendation is to approve the release of the updated draft Little Howrah Beach Master Plan for community and stakeholder consultation, and for the CEO to then report the consultation outcomes back to elected members at a future council meeting. Call for a mover, please. Councillor Kennedy, thank you. Councillor Warren, a seconder, thank you. Councillor Kennedy.
No, thank you, Mayor, other than to say let's go out to the community and hear what they have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Warren, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to remind colleagues, this is not about whether or not you like the master plan, it's about whether we ask the community if they like it, and that's the decision that before us tonight, is whether we ask the community, and of course we should.
Anyone else wish to speak to this? Councillor James, thank you.
I just want to actually pose a question, if I may, Mr Mayor, and that is, yep, I think it's great. It's been long coming, but is there a dollar value on this?
The consultation, Councillor James?
No, on the actual master plan. There's a lot of detail, there's a lot of construction, there's a lot of, well...
Councillor Jones, as you know, there's stages. So are you looking for a headline figure here, or are you looking for figures for stages, or...?
No, recently I asked a question in relation to the Victoria Esplanade and those stages 1 and 2, and I was told that it was 1.1 and 1.3. So is there a sort of a...
Thank you, Councillor James.
A dollar.
If the community come back and back in the master plan in its totality, we then decide based on that feedback to deliver everything that the plan says. Is there a dollar figure, Mr Graham? Not wanting to put you on the spot.
No, through you, Mr Mayor, there's certainly Section 7 of the Finance says the next development of the master plan will involve an implementation plan, which will have some cost estimates to inform council on how this may be considered to be delivered through budget processes in the future.
Thank you. So we're not committing ourselves to any expense here except the community consultation segment. Clearly, then there's community expectation management on the back of that, but that's our job as directors of this organisation, to determine what's the best way forward and how best to responsibly expend ratepayers' funds.
Yes, thank you. And that's the purpose of my question, is that there must be a dollar value associated with this. And all I want, if we're asked by the community, and I think people will basically approach us and say, it's great, it's going to be really good for Little Howrah Beach, but how much is this going to cost us? And all I really like to know, there must be an estimate. Is there a dollar value associated with this?
Well, again, at the moment, we're talking about the whole plan. I'm sure we can come back to you with the briefing note on that. So, unless there's something else you'd like to add?
There's nothing I can add.
Yeah.
With respect, it'll be a briefing note to us.
Yeah, that's right. Understanding it is an iterative process. So tonight, as Councillor Warren effectively pointed out, this is about going to the community and asking for their feedback on the draft. Okay. Councillor Hume, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to put a question as well, and I have a look at some of the aspects of this plan from the perspective of the, as the chair of the Access and Inclusion, Disability Access and Inclusion Working Group. And I can see that there are accessibility initiatives in here, but at the same time we have a project that's going on looking at accessibility of beaches around Clarence. And I'm just wondering if this beach is, this master plan means that this beach would be excluded from that project, or does that project inform the master plan? I'm just wondering what the order is in terms of the beach accessibility project and this master plan.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Mr. Graham, please.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I believe that project will assist in forming this master plan and the development of this master plan.
Thank you, Mr. Graham.
Through you, Mr Mayor, but I will also, I believe it's a good question for me to inform Council on the status of that strategy. So we'll do that through a weekly briefing report.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, having said that, I'm also very much looking forward to, as part of the consultation on this master plan, bringing it to the next meeting of the Disability Access and Inclusion Working Group for their comments. They're very sharp-eyed in terms of noticing accessibility issues that others miss, and particularly because there are a number of members on that working group who have mobility issues, and so they do notice these things when able-bodied people like myself don't pick them up. But I do think it's an excellent plan in terms of the accessibility, also the improvement to the amenity of the area, and I think it has great potential to connect that area to transport and to be a place that people visit and enjoy, because in its current state I doubt it gets much visitation at all. So looking forward to going out to consultation and seeing what comments we get back.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Anyone else wishing to make a contribution? Being no, Councillor Kennedy.
No, thank you, Mayor. Just looking forward to hearing from the community. Thank you.
Wonderful. I'll put the motion then. We've just had to wrap up. I'm sorry. I did talk first, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Moving now on to, there are no financial management items. 8.4, Councillors Kennedy and Councillor Chong, if you'd like to leave us, please. All right, moving on to item now 8.4.1, which is General Grants Program. The recommendation is that Council approve the distribution of financial grants totalling $23,385 in support of community, cultural and creative applications to community groups and organisations as detailed in the attachments to the associated report. Call for a mover, please. Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Warren. Councillor Hunter, please.
As we know, Council has a few grant rounds. This is one of them. I think it's great that we offer these grants. I have been on grants committees on councils before. It's very challenging to have to select who meets the criteria, who meets the objectives, whose applications are complete. There's not enough money for everyone to go around. It's always a learning process for the people who put in for grants. So I would just suggest anyone who is unsuccessful that you please reach out to the officers and get that feedback so that you can inform your grant application the next round. But I think these are great opportunities that we are supporting. So I seek officers, my colleagues' support.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Councillor Warren, please.
Thank you. I endorse Councillor Hunter's comments. I also would like to commend the officers on the professional approach and the detailed feedback that's included in the report as to why certain applications were not successful and how they may adapt to be successful in the future. And I really appreciate that back and forth and willingness to work with people, and echo Councillor Hunter's comments that people should be encouraged to follow up and take that advice, that no, not this time is not necessarily no, never. We want to see as many of these and the diversity get across the line as possible. And it's good to see these projects, which are all very worthy, and some which weren't successful this time, which may well be worthy next time. So I do seek my colleagues' support.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Councillor Mulder.
Now, how do I do the segue back to what I wanted to say before? No, I don't. I commend the program, and what I really do commend is a decision that I think we made last year or the year before, which was to take the councillors out of the process. In other words, to take the politics out of grant funding, a phrase similar to which you will hear in the near future. But and on that basis, although I accept the fact that it's a perception of conflict from people who have left the room because they are associated with organisations, the fact that we take this out of the political arena in the council means that technically they don't need to do that. But although I commend them for doing it, but the great work and having sat on these judges is. Unfortunately, it's not like our education system. Everyone doesn't get a certificate of attainment, so we're and some hard decisions have to be made, and we can debate endlessly and second guess the officers. But I reckon on balance they've got it pretty right.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Anyone else wishing to make a contribution? Going. Councillor Hunter, would you like a right of reply? Thank you, colleagues. I put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Please invite Councillors Kennedy and Chong back in, and if Councillor Walker's there too, I'm sure he'd like to participate in this next item. Thank you, colleagues. Well, now we move on to item 8.4.2, which is the submission in response to proposed draft development assessment panel's bill consultation. The recommendation is that we note the bill has been released for comment and that we endorse the submission and authorise the CEO to provide it as Clarence City Council's response to the consultation. Moved by Councillor Mulder. Is there a seconder, please? Councillor Goyne, thank you very much. Councillor Mulder, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't understand the reluctance. I think it's an excellent submission and it sticks it right where it needs to be. Take the politics out of planning. Do you know how you do that? You make the minister make the decisions. No politics there. No politics there. No. No. You take it out of the hand of the bloody minded dinosaurs and you give it to the minister. And haven't they got a great track record at the moment? And my understanding is wherever you've done this throughout the country, wherever you've taken it out of local government, and we aren't making the decisions, every decision we make is appealable anyway, you know, and you can make the assessment that we're seen to be anti this or seen to be pro that. Absolute rubbish. Our decisions have to be made on planning grounds, and if those planning grounds don't stack up, then our decision is overturned. Sorry. Now you're going to say to a minister, you can do this. You make the decision, the developer trots off to you. We ignore the local representatives, and what we do is we take it straight to an assessment panel, and their decision is appealable only to the Supreme Court, who normally only deal with matters of process, not the actual benefits or otherwise. We've seen tonight a couple of examples where the planning scheme is out of kilt with reality, where your local councillors have been able to come up and move an alternative recommendation. We've seen it with the 7 Mile Beach units, where the planning officers recommended it. The community stood up, and despite threats about people, being taken to court because they'd prejudged matters and all the rest of it, one of the planning grounds and our own planning advice was, no, this isn't a relevant matter, it meets the criteria. And then we had a consultant who said, no, you can't do that, when council said maybe we should do it. And in the end, the appeals tribunal, as it was at that stage, upheld what we said. Because, these precedents, everything is different, everything is thing. There is new data comes to hand as things develop, and thank heavens the 7 Mile Beach community stood up and they maintained their rage. So now we have this proposal, which curiously arose around the same time of the matters I'm talking about. If someone like Skylands, which fits the bill perfectly, right? So the developer then goes and he trots in and puts his proposal and council's out of the loop. We can make a submission, but we're not in the loop. Yet I, amongst a number of others, have been really fighting for it. There's not much we can do about the densification, but there's a lot we can do about that ring road, about the Oceana Drive Droopy Point connection, to not replicate the mistakes we've made with Cambridge Road, East Derwent Highway, and I go on again about Clarence Street. We can model it on where there isn't anything, where there are no private entrances. There are just proper intersections, so you don't get that clash, you don't get that parking problem, you don't get all the issues that we've discussed a couple of times on this and many other developments. But you take this out of our hands, and that community perspective, that long reach, just inflicts us with, in 20 years' time, you won't be able to get around Droopy Point because there's caravans parked there, there's cars parked there, and private cars are parked on the public streets and all those things. So they're the sorts of impacts we can have at the strategic level that they want to take away from us. Now, they will do what they want to do. Fortunately, we've got a minority government, so we have an opportunity to lobby people. But one of the things that we have an advantage of is the Legislative Council. Whenever there's a piece of legislation comes through, they have a briefing by the agency concerned, at which time people can make some lobbies. So I would seriously request that the CEO has a chat to LGAT. Not only do we put this submission in, which is basically briefing the House of Assembly, but that we that they attend and organise a briefing to put their issues to the Legislative Council, that house of review, which can have a look at these issues. Because I, like the LGAT submission says, I'm offended that they say that there's a perception that we're not doing our job.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder.
Without any evidence.
Despite the fact that every 3 weeks and sometime in between I think about how much I hate the planning matters on this council and quite seriously consider resigning over the fact that I have to make such decisions, I also see the benefit in it being brought into this place, because I know the time that I take, even in my sleep-addled, toddler crawling over my laptop mind, and I can guarantee you it's a lot more than the artificial intelligence used by other places.
Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Councillor Warren, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is a blatant power grab, but it's also a really poor piece of legislation. And I thank the officers for drawing our attention to those details where the bill is inconsistent, unworkable, and other problems. And our submission details all of those things. Could it be that this bill was prepared in haste? I don't know. But I think it's not just a poor underlying concept, it's an unworkable implementation. So I'm very comfortable endorsing this submission, which details all the issues with the bill and also says this is a really bad idea, don't do it.
Councillor Chong, please.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Can I also commend the staff and the work that's been done to put this together? I think it's very detailed, very thorough and entirely realistic in its commentary. For me, the line in the report that says it all is the one in paragraph 6, which says, the current process described in the draft DAP bill is incompetent.
Councillor Hume, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I also want to echo the sentiments of those who congratulated Mr Maher and his team on an excellent submission, an excellent detailed analysis of the bill and its many flaws that was brought to the workshop. And as other councillors have indicated, it's not just that the bill takes a lot of the power of planning out of the hands of councils and puts it in the hands of an elected official, but it is the fact that the bill is so poorly drafted that it has a number of, I would hope, would be unintended consequences, maybe intended consequences. It depends on whether the drafting of the bill was malicious or incompetent, and I'm still not sure which it is. Just to give you an example, if you look at the fact that the submission points out that proposals being brought to DAPS could be done without any planning criteria whatsoever, and this undermines the entire planning system. Whatever complaints we may have about the planning scheme and the planning system, it's a lot better than having no criteria apply whatsoever, or whatever criteria the minister should decide to come up with at the time to fit that development. But we could actually have a situation where resources are wasted assessing a development application through a council according to those criteria, and then it goes to the DAP, and all of that work is completely thrown out. Instead of being fed into the process, we've just wasted our extensive resources, and planning does take a lot of work. They say that the government says this is about taking politics out of planning, but to me, the DAPs, when they were initially proposed, we provided some examples of circumstances in which they may be useful, such as, for example, you could have a council where the majority of members or all the members could have a conflict of interest, for example, like they're assessing a development of a councillor. So there were circumstances potentially where they could be useful. But we also had in that submission a number of criteria to apply to the process to make sure that it's workable. But taking the politics out of planning, I would like to see where the politics is in planning at the moment. What is the problem that this is trying to resolve? Because if councils are making political decisions, then why is it that the fact that very few applications are appealed, and then the majority of those applications, over 80%, are resolved by mediation? It is a solution looking for a problem, and I would challenge the government in saying that they want to take the politics out of planning to provide some examples of where political decisions are being made by local government. Because I'm certainly not aware of any examples, and I haven't heard them cite any specific examples. It is an excellent submission, and once again I congratulate our planning staff for the detailed work that's gone into this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Anyone else wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Walker, please.
Well, 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 if it isn't the consequences of our own actions. What has been the inspiration for DAPS? I can think of no other council this term that has given any government more inspiration for working down this framework than Clarence. Do I have concerns? Yeah, I have some concerns, and I have the right to express them in an individual response, and so do councillors, and they may wish to do so. DAPs, I think, will be very useful for small councils that face complicated decisions. When councillors may be bringing forward development applications in their own council, and I think for that check and balance of when a council itself wants to do so. Though I do think that they should probably have a pretty small remit to start out. But here we are. We talk about a housing crisis, we talk about good planning. Almost any council would have loved to have a new urbanism project like Skylands. This council decided otherwise. After working around the concept of hotel, the need and potential location, working hand in glove, cooperating with the state to work on boundaries and titles so that a site could be identified, agreeing to that and that happening, and then not really discussing it when council decided to change its mind. As I said, there's no other bigger inspiration for DAPs than council, at this council. And I think, yeah, 28 other councils may not wish to give us Christmas cards when this comes about, because our decisions have impacts, and I think we are the inspiration for this project. So whilst there may be much of merit in the response that's developed, I don't wish to be part of this council banging its spoon on the high chair after how we got ourselves here. So I won't be supporting this application.
Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Thank you, Councillor Tarko.
I'll keep it short because I'm in thunderous agreement with everyone else around the table, a section of one apparently. This continues the trend of removing the say from local communities and how their communities move forward, which is patently anti-democratic. I commend the officers for tearing strips off this complete garbage, and I hope the government listens to the community and heeds the call of groups like PMAT and scraps the DAP.
Thank you, Councillor Tarko. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? There being none, before I call on Councillor Mulder for his right of reply, colleagues, I now enter the debate as a councillor, not as your mayor. The Draft Development Assessment Panel's bill is exceedingly poor legislation. It undermines democratic processes that have underpinned planning decisions in Tasmania for decades. As we know, it limits or removes community and stakeholder engagement on planning decisions in the absolute favour of developers who wish to ensure their projects are not subject to public scrutiny, accountability, and for what we've recently seen, the appeals process. And just before we started this evening, the Parliamentary Secretary for Housing and Planning, Simon Barakis MP, put out a media release attacking Hobart City Council. And this is a government coming from the Parliamentary Secretary of Planning and Housing that talks about taking the politics out of planning. Well, Mr Barakis, in his media release, claims that the DAPS bill will improve the certainty, transparency and the effectiveness of planning across Tasmania. He claims the bill backs in common sense. Well, on both those claims, I'd say it's nothing more than glib hyperbole. Make absolutely no mistake, this is a thinly veiled attempt to centralise power and bypass local councils, which are closer to the communities that we serve and more attuned to their specific needs, expectations and concerns. So whether by accident or design, the proposed DAPs are not subject to the planning scheme or any assessment guidelines, nor do they include a mechanism for appeals. Now, that alone should give rise to significant concern from all fair-minded Tasmanians. And to focus on a local example, which was touched on a moment ago, well known to all of us, the Minister for Planning recently decided to take Shambroad's proposed hotel at Kangaroo Bay out of Council's hands, which is highly questionable, particularly as we've raised numerous concerns on behalf of our community. The Minister ignored Council's concerns, instead relying on AI-generated assessments to justify his decision toward its major project status. I mean, you seriously cannot make this stuff up. In my view, this raises more questions than answers about the quality of the process and decision-making. If the Tasmanian government was truly interested in the community's views on this legislation, it would have engaged in genuine consultation rather than its current tokenistic approach. Some might recall the last time this happened, the proposed reform of the fire services levy, which did not progress, largely on account of this minister, the same minister's failure to properly consult. Colleagues, the simple fact is the government has taken too long to deliver the Tasmanian Planning Scheme, planning policies and land use strategy reviews. And now, as a distraction, it is spending its time devising legislation to benefit a few. Put bluntly, the state government is undermining land use reform in Tasmania with their politics and poorly informed interference. I strongly endorse our submission and call on the state government to act in the best interests of all Tasmanians, not just the privileged few. Councillor Moulder, your right of reply, please.
Well, Mr Mayor, how the mighty have fallen. I don't disagree with anything you've just said, but I will take a few exceptions about the assumptions that our decisions relating to Skylands and the Shambroad Hotel development are what triggered this. We were called bloody-minded dinosaurs because we were enforcing the planning scheme and we didn't want to make the changes that the minister expected us to make. So buried in this is a requirement that the minister can direct us to make changes to his planning scheme because he thinks we should. Is that taking the politics out of planning? No, it's sticking them in there. And if we talk about, we talk about the hotel development. Sorry, that's not a planning matter. We've already approved plans for that hotel. The problem there was that the developer can't build it. And my bet is the builder can't build it because of what you alluded to earlier on. The tourism industry and the accommodation rates aren't there. I wonder whether there is a hotel developer or whether we're going to see a little switch and a request for us to change the use. Don't forget, the real reason that we knocked this back as a council as a whole was because the contract required a hospitality school and a hotel. And the latest proposal is no hospitality school. So half of the contract isn't being met, and this is all subject to litigation, so I won't go too much further, except to point out, particularly to you, Mr Mayor, that the buyback clause is not fabled, as you have said in the media. What this really brings about is the Hobart City Council, who didn't approve some social housing, which they now have. And that was a matter that was dealt with through the planning process, through all the appeals. And even in the submission, the government itself admits that this is a perception of politics because the process is this is not our planning scheme. This does not bear the signature of the Mayor or the CEO. The Clarence planning scheme bears the signature of the Minister. We do not control it. We simply apply it and enforce it. And as we've seen a couple of times tonight, we do so with discretion and with concern for the people.
Councillor Moulder. Before I put the motion, I've provided a great deal of licence and latitude tonight, but I would just remind colleagues, particularly the previous speaker, not to take snide swipes at the chair or any other colleague in this chamber during debate. As smart as it might be, it's not appreciated by any of us. And I know Councillor James was on the receiving end earlier tonight as well. So, colleagues, I'll now put the motion, which is the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? So carried. Thank you very much. Moving now on to 8.4.3, which is the revised fee schedule for Rosny Early Learning. I call for a mover, please. Councillor Hume, seconded Councillor James. Thank you, Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mayor. I notice in the report 2.1 it says the introduction of the Federal Government Worker Retention Payment Grant scheme will likely cause a capped 4.4% fee increase across competitor services from 1st of January again on 8th of August, leading to further disparity between Rosny early learning fees and competitors. I noticed that the fee rises are that 4.4%. I'd just like to ask, does that mean that the service will be receiving the worker retention payment, and therefore the educators in that service will benefit from that?
CEO, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. No, we are currently negotiating an enterprise agreement that includes a provision that will allow us to do that if we choose to do it, but we haven't made a decision one way or the other at this point.
I'm pleased to hear that we're open to doing it, because it'd certainly be very positive to see. I'm very much in favour of the worker retention payment. There are some issues around the design of the scheme that I've heard from some other services, but it's certainly important that educators are recognised for their professionalism. It's a profession that's long been under-recognised, and we used to we used to call them child carers, not educators, but I think there's more of an understanding now that it's more than just feeding kids, singing songs to them, wiping their noses. It's actually a structured program of education that's delivered within a comprehensive early years framework. It's difficult work that requires a high degree of skill and professionalism. So I'm hopeful that we can secure that payment and an associated agreement, but that will obviously be up, a matter for the negotiations. But I support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. I might just invite the CEO to expand on his earlier answer.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in relation to the scheme that you were referring to, Councillor Hume, we share a number of concerns which you've alluded to regarding that scheme and its implementation, and particularly the future costs to council and other operators. And it's for that reason that we're not wholesale committing ourselves to it at this point in time. But we do recognise within not only our enterprise agreement negotiations, but generally as well, the incredible value that our early childhood educators bring to our community. And again, that's one of the reasons why we're making adjustments to the fee schedule at this time of year, when we'd normally be doing that on the back of a budget.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Chairman, and I didn't make any snide comments in relation to what...
No, one was made at you earlier, Councillor James.
I beg your pardon?
There was a comment earlier in the evening, but I'll discuss it with you later. So it wasn't reflective of you, it was reflective of another person making
okay. Thank you. I just wanted clarification on that, because...
I think everyone else is aware, but...
Yeah. Made that fairly clear.
Anyway, thank you, Councillor. No more cracks. Thank you, Councillor James.
I have the floor. Thanks, Councillor Mulder. Look, okay, I have mentioned that when we attend and participate in the budget workshop, we establish the rates, fees and charges at that time, and that of course was on the 17th of June 2024, when we formally adopted the solicitor fees and charges schedule. Then we had another bite at this under the building services, where we had to have another motion coming to the chair, before the chair, with regard to an adjustment to the building services area. And now we have, and this of course is something that we need to address because of the nature of that industry and what the competition is in relation to it. So I'm going to support the motion, but I do it reluctantly, because I just, and one of these councillors, I've been here, probably some people think I've been here too long, but nevertheless I'm here and I've still got 2 years to go. And then I might seek re-election. So look, the other point about it I want to make is that the propensity of us making changes to the fees and charges is really something that I think we need to get our house in order. Now, I know circumstances arise and so on, and in this particular case it was something that came out of the blue, and I accept that. But I really would like to raise the point that if we do have any changes which are more of a procedural, operational matter, then we try to refrain from bringing another motion to the council to make changes to the annual rates, fees and charges. Having said that, I support this. I believe it's appropriate. We have to stand alone, or basically the council's after-school care is one of the most important parts of our operation, and all stand-alone, fully self-funded services. But nevertheless, some of our staff who provide this excellent service need to be recompensed, and that's the nature of it. So I will support the recommendation.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Thank you, Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, nobody likes fees going up, especially in these straitened times, but also we want the best people caring for our children. And it says in 1.6 here that the service faces increases to operating costs and wages to maintain a professional and safe service to the community. So we've done a comparison with the market. We were at the low end of charges. This will bring us into the medium range. You can't, it's difficult to put a value on what this means, particularly for working mothers who take the sort of the lion's share of caring responsibilities. And if we don't run a sustainable service, then maybe we can't run a service at all, and that may impact on a number of families being able to have their children cared for in a safe and professional environment. Some people might argue that we shouldn't be running a service like this, and that we should leave it to the market. And to those people I would say, does that mean we shouldn't run the Clarence Pool either? Services like this that are run for the benefit of the community in a not-for-profit environment are there as a safety net for those people who could face skyrocketing charges in other establishments. So I believe that it's really important that we do continue to offer this service on a sustainable level. It's not there to make a profit, it's just there to cover the costs and to provide a safe environment for children. So I do support this.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Anyone else wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Moulder, please.
I do. Should I say I declare a former interest? My wife Tosca was a childcare and actually worked for Clarence, but she hasn't for some time now. But she has worked in a number of areas and spoke very highly of her time at the Clarence Council, at our childcare centre. But the real issue here is setting charges in relation to the competition policy. So when there is a private sector, when there is a private market, you can't be in there using ratepayers' funds to undercut business enterprises. I would actually like to see we get to the point where we pay our people more than the going market rate to set an example as to how this should be done. Should this be council business? I would think not. I would like to see, if we're talking about people who are struggling and people who are, in this time of crisis and working thing, that maybe our education department should be taking a greater role in early education. And that's not undermining the work the council does, because, as I've said before, it's a very, very valuable service. But getting back to the point is that we cannot be undercutting the market by underpaying our people and undercharging people, because that when we run foul of competition policy. And there is a difference between this kind of service and running a swimming pool. And even there, you'll find that the competition policy allows us some latitude, which I don't think it really should be in this space, because what that is delivering is not a community type of service in the sense that it's within the remit of council's services that it should provide. But we're in that space, and the last thing we want to be doing is undercutting the market. So I'm all for this. As for doing the charges, here we are. We cannot, in the competition world, be saying, well, we said that's what we said in last year. The market's gone up 20%, but we're still going to do these charges because that's in our budget. That's where you have to be flexible. That's where you have to meet the market. And if on the way through, some of our valued and highly significant early childcare educators get a pay rise, then so be it, because they are certainly deserving of it. They have one of the most responsible positions in our community, teaching our kids, and they're some of the lowest paid.
Any other colleague wishing to make a contribution? There being none, Councillor Hume, right of reply.
Nothing further.
Thank you, colleagues. I'll put the motion, and that is a recommendation. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving now on to item 9.1. As the Deputy Mayor isn't here this evening, that motion lapses. It may be represented at another council meeting in the near future. So moving now on to item 10, councillors' questions time. 10.3, answers to questions without notice. Previous council meeting as listed in the agenda. Questions without notice. Are there any questions on the floor, starting this evening with Councillor Mulder?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My first question relates to the proposal for a hotel development on Rosny Hill Road, which I think council approved probably 3.5, 4 years ago. We've been told several times that there are negotiations on process. So my question now becomes is there an end date to those negotiations? How are they progressing? And is there a date when we all walk away by saying, obviously, after all this time, we cannot reach agreement?
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. CEO, please.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. That's a good question, Councillor Mulder. We've certainly internally been liaising through our legal representatives trying to move the process along, but the delays that we're experiencing, if I can say, aren't of our making, but we are trying to move them further along. There is a degree of frustration on our side.
Thank you, CEO. Second question, Councillor Mulder.
Supplementary, I asked, is there an end date to when we say, sorry, we can't agree, we're moving away? Or
that's something that we are working through at the moment, Councillor, but I can't be precise about that.
My second question actually relates to a question from a member of the public this afternoon about the issue of admittedly activists and the issue of workplace safety by citizens attending council meetings and asking questions. My question through you, Mr Mayor, but probably to the CEO, as a person responsible for workplace safety, surely we could have answered that question without taking it on notice?
CEO, would you like to?
Yes, thank you. As you'll probably appreciate, Councillor, that's my prerogative in terms of how I wish to consider the question and respond to it.
Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mayor. Two questions. First of all, I found out recently that Clarence City Council is what's known as a solver in the Snap, Send and Solve service. This is a service where you can actually, I think through an app, you can take a photo on your mobile phone, send it through and get a response. But only recently was I made aware of this, and I'm just wondering how this is promoted to our residents and ratepayers.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Well, can I just indicate that I am even more recently now made aware of that service. Ms Wicks, you're studiously avoiding my gaze. Are you in a position, or can we come back via weekly briefing notes?
Yes, we can come back with a briefing report with all the information that I will find out.
Thank you, Ms Wicks. Now, do we give him a second question? Councillor Hume.
Ms Wicks has just recently been made aware too. And I just wanted to see if there was any update on the Department of State Growth's work on the Flagstaff Gully Link Road options.
That's a very good question. Mr Graham?
Through you, Mr Mayor, we've certainly written to the Department of State Growth, but we haven't received a response yet, so we'll follow up again on that matter.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Thank you, Councillor Hume. Councillor James.
A couple of questions. Firstly, I did draw this matter to the attention of the CEO, and that's the state of the Rosny Mall and the absolutely filth and vomit that's on the seats on the Eastlands shelter sheds of the in the Rosny Mall. So my question is there an arrangement between Metro and Clarence Council to jointly maintain, clean, and in this particular case, remove the vomit off the seats that are obviously for the people who are trying to catch a bus or aren't able to sit on the seats, to be honest. So is there a joint maintenance arrangement, cleaning contractors that are responsible for this? And if so, can we have that vomit and that other filth that's on the seats removed as soon as possible, please?
Thank you, Councillor James. CEO, please.
Thank you, Councillor James. As I indicated in some of our conversations, the mall is cleaned by a contractor every night. Now, some nights that contractor can go through and in the morning there's a mess. So we have council crews to come through if that's the case, but we rely on people to report those issues effectively. Sometimes that occurs very promptly and other times less so. But in relation to your question in terms of any arrangement with Metro, no, this is solely a responsibility and a cost that council bears in maintaining the bus mall.
Second question, Councillor.
The second question, the Mayor did provide correspondence in relation to the High Performance Centre and that the geotechnical reports have been provided to the government. So my question is in relation to that, and I'm thinking aloud here as to whether Minister Vincent is to be the responsible person to make that announcement, because we're getting close to Christmas, and whichever way it goes, you know, whether it stays, or it's built here or it goes to Kingborough, I think the people on both sides of the spectrum, in this case, ought to be able to be advised of the results of this prior to Christmas, and is it possible for us to seek an early decision from the Minister responsible?
Councillor James, thank you for your question. Believe you me,
I know
this is something that is front of mind for everybody in this chamber, but particularly for me, because I'm asked this question several times a day, as I know that we all are, as to when that's the prerogative of the state government, the Department of State Growth, as to when they make the announcement. I think, as I've mentioned in this chamber 2 meetings ago, I was at lunch at the SFL Grand Final luncheon with the former Minister for Sport, the Honourable Nick Street MP. He told me then it was imminent. Of course, now he's on the back bench. His replacement as Minister for Sport, the Honourable Nick Digan, MLC. I reached out to the Minister when he was sworn in, that very day that he was sworn in at Government House. Came and said, yeah, love to catch up. We really do need to get our heads around this. And now crickets. It's been 3 weeks. Now, in fairness to Minister Digan, I understand Cabinet did not meet last week because the Premier and the Secretary of the Department of State Growth, Craig Limpkin, were overseas together on a trade mission. But it is getting ridiculous because on the 22nd of December last year, I said shoulder to shoulder with the former Sports Minister out there, where Rosny was declared the preferred site, we've not been told anything different. And as the correspondence from DSG tabled earlier tonight indicates, we haven't been made privy to any of the geotechnical information. And you also might be aware too that Kath McCann, Executive Director of the team, all came out of the blocks 2 weeks ago, calling then for the government to make a decision for the same reasons that you outlined. This has been extraordinarily frustrating, and frankly, it is beyond belief that we're nearly 12 months down the track and no one has any certainty. So I share your frustration. We are doing our level best, but at the end of the day, it's up to the government to step up and actually make the announcement. And from my perspective, that was made nearly 12 months ago on the 22nd of December. Now, to meet the timeframes that the government themselves imposed with their agreement with the AFL, they're not going to meet them. They're meant to have the DAs lodged before Christmas. If we're going to enter VFLW's teams within the timeframes, we're not going to be using the High Performance Centre. They just won't be available. So I share your frustration. As soon as I have some news, believe you me, I will be telling everyone. And whether it's good or bad, our community needs some certainty. Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Walker.
Thank you. I'm very much looking forward to attending your opening of the Seniors Exercise Park later this month.
It's tomorrow morning, actually, 10:30.
It's later.
Too old, too late.
And again, a project dear to my heart, as I ran as an unsuccessful candidate but successfully secured funding for this project. Just on that, given that the opening, the project is largely with a state government grant, I'm just wanting to know which members of that government were provided an invitation to attend.
Yes, certainly. The Premier, the Minister for, correct me if I'm wrong, the Minister for Sport, the local Liberal, all seven local state members, but the Premier as well. Yep. Because of now the Premier's unable, I haven't got him as attending, but the Leader of the Opposition, Mr O'Byrne, and I did talk today with both Minister Petruza and Minister of Betts at different functions. Today, I understand, unfortunately, they've got diary clashes, but please believe me, we did our level best to extend the invitation and give plenty of notice as well. So it'll be a wonderful event, and everyone's invited tomorrow at Simmons Park at 10:30am for the grand opening of the Seniors Exercise Area. Any other questions? Councillor Walker, any other questions?
No, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
8 local members, wouldn't it? Considering the other house.
Oh, sorry, absolutely. So the Honourable Luke Edmonds was invited. Ms Lovell wasn't, though. Councillor Goyen.
I'm starting to feel a bit like a squeaky wheel. As per our briefing report with the Taswater filling stations, I do believe that they were saying optimal time was about 15 minutes for filling. Somebody earlier today timed it at 40 minutes. Do we have the capacity to follow up and monitor to ensure that Taswater is delivering on their promises?
Mr Graham.
Through you, Mr Mayor, we certainly can't monitor timing ourselves, but we can ask Taswater in terms of what is the average filling or capacity of the system to the local contractors. Yeah.
Thank you.
My second question is probably a little bit left of field. Does council have the capacity to monitor and or filter councillors' emails?
I'll hand to the Sarah in a moment, but my understanding is there's the normal security protocols in place. But if you wish to block someone, that's your prerogative. But they are, in effect, individual email addresses germane to you and to all of us as individuals. But I know that our CIO's not here today, but...
Thank you, Mayor. I can provide an answer, and if I'm in any way wrong, I'll provide a correction. Councillor email addresses are part of councillors' email system for all staff, so councillors and staff are effectively the same within that system. Those emails are recorded in our servers and systems, so technically they could be inquired against or discovered, if that's the right word. But that's not something that we do. Yeah. But to be completely frank, yes, they are discoverable, just as any email would be ultimately if you have access to a server.
Sorry, was that the answer you were seeking? I misunderstood the question. Thank you, CEO. So I took the wrong end of the stick there. Councillor Darko.
Yeah, we've had a couple of requests for updates, and I was wondering if we could get an update on the current status of the proposed development for the top of Rosny Hill.
Thank you. The Rosny Hill Hotel. My answer to Councillor Mulder was that we
Apologies, I must have been tuned out.
Yeah, I'll give it to you again. So we have been trying to finalise lease arrangements. There's been a bit of back and forth. There's been a lot of delay in terms of getting responses to particular issues. We are following that up through our legal representatives with some degree of frustration at this point in time. Not with our legal representatives, but with the other side.
Second question, Councillor Darko. Councillor Warren. Councillor Chong. Councillor Kennedy. All right, well, colleagues, now I'll call for a motion to move into closed meeting, please. Thank you, Councillor Warren. Seconded, Councillor Goyne. Thank you very much. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. Well, thank you to those members of the public who've attended in person this evening and those joining us at home via the live stream. As always, we appreciate your feedback, and as mentioned earlier tonight, you'll say portal on our website is now taking feedback on meeting times. So thank you for your company. Same time, same place, 3 weeks' time. Thank you. Good night. Please end the live feed. Wonderful, thank you. Colleagues, moving on to 11.1.